The most influential factor about Christianity and in its history is Constantine. And he's the one who decided to elevate Paul, not Christians, because Paul was completely obscure by the 300s. There'd been that whole problem with Marcion claiming Paul was the only apostle, and basically he was the official church had to basically say Paul's not an apostle. That's what Tertullian's against Marcion says. He's not an apostle. He doesn't have any verification of being an apostle. And you, Marcion, you cannot prove Paul's valid just from the book of Luke. You don't use Matthew. You don't use Mark. You don't use our Bible, so you are invalid, and Paul doesn't have any authority equal to the 12. I mean, everything of the Bible was used against Paul, and he's just hanging out powerless until 324, 325. And it was a marriage made in heaven or hell, depending on your perspective. Because what happened was 3 or 4 years, 3 years exactly, before Constantine's first reaching out to the Christian community to wedge an alliance, so to speak, is in 321 AD. This is the turning point of history. Constantine doesn't know yet where this is going himself. He orders that all rest and worship will be done on Sunday, the day of the sun, to worship the venerable day of the sun. And he meant sun in the sky, meaning God, because to him God was named Sol, S-O-L, meaning it's the Latin word for sun. Sol Invictus, that meant invincible sun. So this is the God he's worshiping. He's not worshiping the Christian God. He's going to claim later an experience 9 years earlier where he had a, quote, conversion to Christianity, but he did nothing about it, and he was completely pagan, and he was using coin programs, and for a decade after that, where it says on the coin, Constantine, friend of Sol Invictus. So it's the most obvious fraud of all time. It's so obvious that it seems like it's like he's being so honest how fraudulent it is that you can't believe that anyone went along with this. But he's the emperor, and you have to know he's also the Pontifex Maximus. Pontiff is later known as the name for the pontiff of Rome, the bishop of Rome. And that's because later emperors, many almost 70, 80 years later, the Roman emperors give up this office and they give it to the Christian bishop of Rome. And so they were allowed to use the name Pontifex. But Pontifex Maximus meant the chief or high priest of all Roman religions. And Roman government, Roman law was the emperor was in charge of all religion. And he was also a god, you have to understand. They thought he was a god. And every one of them, even if they were Marcus Aurelius, and he says, I don't want the title. It doesn't matter, you're still a god. They're all gods, each one of them. But Constantine had this special idea that he wanted worship of Sol Invictus, and there's a subtle reason why, psychologically. He does believe he's Sol Invictus, as we'll see. We're going to show you a narrative of Simca in his experience investigating Constantine. Anyway, so I'm going to show you a little bit about the order of 321 AD, and we'll discuss that. Okay, so let's take a quick look here at 321 AD, and we're going to go backwards when we're done with this. Constantine worshipped the sun god and simply gave him the name of Jesus at one point for our gullible consumption. We're going to prove that, okay? But first you need to see the proof that he's worshiping and wants this god of the sun to be worshipped. In further devotion to the sun god, in 321 AD, Constantine, this is a quote, instituted the weekly day of the sun, Dies Solis, as a recognized civil holiday. This is in Susan Roll's book called The Origin of Christmas, Netherlands, 1995. This is the origin of what we call Sunday. It was the official Roman day of rest. This is in Wikipedia's article on Sol Invictus. The decree ran on the venerable. You need to know in Latin the word venerable, and in English means worship. Worship worthy. If I said you were the venerable, Queen of England, it means you're worthy of worship. So this meant this was the day you could worship the sun, in the sky as God. So it said, on the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all the workshops be closed. So Constantine is issuing this order having nothing to do with promoting Christianity. This is promoting an enemy of Christianity. He is serving paganism through and through. Yet he's going to try to convince Christians. I've been following. I had a vision of Jesus, but I don't want to jump ahead too fast here. Anyway, you have to also know he was the first one to create this day of Sunday. So it didn't exist. It was the first use of a 7-day week in the Roman calendar. The first day of the week, and most important, was Sunday in honor of Sol Invictus, or he used to be known as Baal. Sol Invictus went through transformations. He was actually known as Baal, and he was depicted as controlling a chariot of horses. And if you look in the Bible, there's a story of the worship of the god of the sun, and it has the same depiction in the Bible in I think it was about 600 BC, that's how it was depicted in a situation inside the Hebrew Bible. The 6 other days all had names of pagan gods associated with them. You know, Saturday is the day of Saturn, and there's other gods on the other days. But Saturday was still the Sabbath day in the religion of the Hebrews. Okay, but there was a pagan day now associated with that, and that would be day 7 in the it was the anyway. It's just that Sabbath is Saturday. Okay, so let me just see. I think that's it. All I wanted to bring out here. Okay, so but now let's show you that this is it's all fraud. So basically he's going to claim he has an experience at Milvian Bridge, the Milvian Bridge. See this? He has a victory. He's now unconstitutionally trying to take control of the government as the only consul to run the government. In Rome, they had a balance of power. There were 2 equal consuls who could negate each other out. So the only way things got done is they had to each agree on what to do. And if they didn't both agree, neither one could do anything. So it was kind of a checkmate. So you had to work cooperatively, and it worked for hundreds and hundreds of years since the 600s BC. And here they are, 900 years later, and he's going to try to make it an unconstitutional, create an empire where he's the only ruler. So he's going to claim this battle. He wins this, and he's going to claim later that Jesus wanted him to win this battle to become an unconstitutional dictator. So just so you get the real picture of what's going on here. And he builds an arch of Constantine to commemorate that. Okay, in 315. I think the Milvian Bridge battle was earlier, somewhat earlier. I think it was maybe 312. We'll have to go back. And on the arch are, various gods. There's the goddess of victory and so on. There's the god, and Constantine is sitting between the sun and the moon, and there is the victory-giving figure is the sun god, whose statuettes are carried by the army's standard bearers, Grant, in his book, 52-53. So it attributes victory to Sol Invictus inside the iconography, the images that are on this arch. And in fact, in Simca's movie, which we'll see an excerpt of, basically they put in the highest relief, in the highest position, the god Sol Invictus in the highest position on the arch of Constantine. There is no reference to anything Christian at all on the arch. There's just pagan gods. Sol Invictus is the victorious god, and so on. So this is where there is a documentary history that is in stone that you can't remove, that disproves all the myths. If you go to all the Christian books you want, you'll see they all say, oh, Constantine was a good Christian. His leading us down to the bi-deity of Jesus. It had nothing to do with the fact he wanted Jesus to be a son of God, just like Sol Invictus was the son of the god Horus. No, that's just a coincidence. He wasn't trying to mold us to fit his religion. He didn't change our rest from Sabbath to Sunday because it had anything to do with us. He wanted us to worship his God of the sun. No. He didn't depict Jesus just like the God of the sun, so we would be, duped into worshiping Jesus, who's now rechanged into just to be exactly like the God who said, no, Doug, that's not what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. Sorry, buddy. This is the biggest fraud of all time. And the proof of the fraud is that Christian historians, Christian books will continue to defend Constantine was a Christian, because to admit what I'm telling you is a fraud, and it's on its face a fraud, they can't handle it. They will never give up. And to give it up is then you're going to understand why Paul became elevated and went from 0 to 100. He went from the bottom of the barrel to all the way to the top. And you'll see, I'll show you the change in the attitude towards him. But we're not there yet. Jesus was missing on the arch. There was no Cairo. That was the thing he'll later claim. He saw a Cairo in the sky that symbolized Christ somehow, the C and the R of Christos. Obviously, the events at Milvian Bridge of Christ's appearance were myths propagated later to win over Christians to his paganized Jesus pronounced it at Nicaea. Simca's History Channel special interviews an antiquities professor while they are craned to take close-up look at the Arch of Constantine, so we'll look at that, leaving no doubt of Constantine's fraud on Christians. It's true. It's sad, but it's true, and you can't deny it. Okay, so we're going to take a step away from this and look at what's going on with Paul and why. So why would he want Paul to be his hero? Why does he want... He realizes he's got a religion that he can use. It has a son of the God, but what was really the best thing he found out? It was there was somebody he could pick out of the pile of writers who wants to end Sabbath, which is a real barrier to get people to rest on, no longer on Shabbat, but to rest on the day of the sun and worship his God of the sun. Even if nothing else, they don't worship their God, and they worship on the same day his God's being worshipped. This will promote the worship that he wants. This is what he's thinking. He's eventually going to try to fuse and change our God to be an exact image of his God, who is a son of God, who isn't a human being indwelled by God, which is what Jesus said, right? Jesus said, the Father dwells in me. No, his God, the son of his God, Sol Invictus, is actually a real God who's born of Horus, of another father god, and his mother, I think she's Osiris, and she's known as Easter, by the way, in Celtic lands. So that's how it's pronounced in Celtic lands, and that's where we get Easter from, and we'll talk about that in another episode. But this is what's really going on. He's going to drive us down this path where we will eventually bow the knee to a version of Jesus that's no longer anywhere what Jesus said he was. Jesus said, who's the true God? John 17, 1-3. Father, you're the only true God. Father, you dwell in me. The Word dwells in me. The Word is not mine. The Logos is not mine. It's the Father's. Okay? The Father dwells in me. This is what Jesus said, but now a different kind of God had to be created in Jesus, and that would make him actually a God. A God from virtual eternity, the first begotten of creation. And they're going to find ways to use Paul and use the Epistle of Hebrews, which is a nothing epistle at the time, merge them into this Bible, and now they're going to create a strong support under Paul and under the Epistle of Hebrews, because these are the epistles that are driving the bus now. And that's why Christianity is going to be a favorite tool of Constantine. So let's now take a look at Paul and his position on the Sabbath and why this was so attractive to Constantine. Okay, so I'm going to I want to show you something that the best way to prove something is to take people who don't know what they're saying is actually harmful to the validity of Paul, and they're admitting it, meaning they're happy to tell you that Paul abolished Sabbath. And this is what Luther and Calvin will say, and Tertullian supposedly says. So I just want you to see the truth about Sabbath and the excitement of Luther and Calvin, that they now know we can stop, resting on Saturday and never do that again. And so let's just, and now you're going to see why Constantine's going to elevate Paul. And I'll show you after I do this that Paul is in the doldrums. There's nobody paying attention to him. He's rarely cited or discussed. And then suddenly all kinds of commentaries come out once Constantine picks us for the golden, give us the golden invitation to the wonderful party in Nicaea. And we're going to have this whole new party with a guy we don't even know him. He has not stepped out to claim any kind of affiliation with Christianity until 1 year before Nicaea. We've got like 12 months to learn who is this guy. And he's going to drag us all the way to Turkey outside of Rome, and we're going to be told, what we're supposed to believe, and we don't even know what it is yet. But he'll tell us when we get there. And so we're all in this happy-go-lucky feeling that we've met this guy, and we don't know why he's doing this, because his assistant was a guy named Lactantius. He was a Christian. He was his secretary, tutor of his children, and he was a Christian. And he's telling Constantine about who are the figures in our church. And he probably told Constantine about Paul, and he probably told him Paul got rid of Sabbath, and the light went on. The light bulb went on in Constantine. I now have my man. I have the religion I can use. And on top of it, we believe in a son of God. We don't believe he's God yet. We're going to now believe it soon. It's just 4 years away. But when he first learns about this from Lactantius, it's 320. Lactantius and him have a conversation where now Constantine is trying to make Lactantius think Constantine, with all his paganism, could be warm to Christianity in 320. That's what the notes in Lactantius' life. But Lactantius told him, obviously, about Paul, and this is why Paul gets picked up, and that's why Christianity is then co-opted by Constantine. Even though he's definitely a pagan, he's going to pretend not to be, or at least pretend to be sympathetic to Christianity. Anyway, did Paul abolish Sabbath? So let's ask this question. Under the law given Moses, most commands do not apply to sojourners or foreigners, but only to Israel. For example, circumcision only mentions sons of Israel, Leviticus 12, verses 1 to 3. One of the exceptions was the Sabbath command. The Sabbath command applies equally to Gentiles living in community with Israel as to any member of Israel. Deuteronomy 5, verses 12 to 15, Leviticus 25, verse 6, Exodus 23, verse 12. That's just to show you God did expect sojourners with Israel. So let's assume more spiritual Israel. Instead of there being no Jew or Gentile, let's go back to the way Jesus is thinking. He's setting up a kingdom. His kingdom is he's the new covenant. The new covenant, according to I think it's Jeremiah, was to be winning back Israel. He had divorced Israel, the northern kingdom. He's now going to win her back, and he was going to reunite them and bring in the Gentiles at the same time. So this is the prophecies that Jesus is trying to fulfill. It's not a separation, or there's no more Jew or Gentile. It's a merger in a new kingdom. Anyway, so God actually conditioned his promise of salvation in the new covenant, which one we're talking about, to eunuchs and Gentiles upon them doing what? Keeping Sabbath. Specifically, the promise in Isaiah 56 of salvation and blessings to such ones, this is virtually just after chapter 53, says salvation is through Messiah's sacrifice. He'll take the sins of the world upon his shoulders. And it says salvation was predicated on two things. So what do you have to do to get this salvation, this sacrifice, this atonement? God's going to say you have to be, as a Gentile, you have to keep the Sabbath from profaning it and keep his hand from doing evil. Sounds pretty reasonable. Isaiah 56:2. Can we do that, ladies and gentlemen? No. We don't follow Isaiah. We follow Paul. What, Doug, why do you keep bringing up stuff we don't want to hear? I'm just telling you the way it is. You're going to go your own way no matter what, some of you. So I'm just telling you this is what it says in God's word. And then he says, those who keep the Sabbaths and choose the things that please me and take hold of my covenant, Isaiah 56, verses 4 to 6. And this is where he says the Gentile will have I'll give you an eternal name, and that's in the book of Revelations too. So, I mean, you got to be totally wed to Paul that you don't want to listen to any of this stuff. But if you love God and you love Jesus, you're going to listen and you're going to follow. And now you're going to learn why the church got in this position where Paul became important. He is the one who's going to wipe this out, to wipe out these commands, the path to salvation. The path to salvation, he's going to break it up. Paul wrote in Colossians 2, verses 16 and 17, let no man therefore judge you in meat or drink or in respect to a holiday or of the new moon or the Sabbath days, which are shadow things to come, but the bodies of Christ. So he's trying to tell the Colossians, you're trying to observe Sabbath? Come on, get with it. That's a shadow. Forget that. Let's just have fun on Shabbat. Don't worry about it. Work, to do your labors all week long. I mean, this is the other thing that makes no sense to me. It's a day off. What are you telling people they can't take the day off? He's literally going to tell the Galatians that you're cursed for trying to take off Saturday. Anyway, now this is before Saturday. This is just when the weeks were, 7 days anyway, but they haven't been renamed yet. We don't have Sunday at this time. They have other names at this time. What is it? This is about 47, 48, 49, 52 AD. So Constantine hasn't changed, and there is no Sunday yet. And that's another thing people don't understand. So now you know it happened in 321 AD. That's when we get Sunday, the day of the God of the sun. So does this really abolish Sabbath? Luther agrees Paul abolished Sabbath. Martin Luther, in a sermon entitled How Christians Should Regard Moses, given in August 1525, says of this passage of Colossians, again, one can prove it from the third commandment that Moses does not pertain to Gentiles and Christians. Now, what did I show you? I showed you right in the commands. It says the sojourners, the foreigners in your midst, have to keep Sabbath. And I showed you Isaiah 56 says that's the condition for salvation for the Gentiles. Much more lax provision, just that's the only one that God gave you a specific command I want followed. The others, I want you to just avoid evil. And use your best, to do that. And, look at my law, get educated. But he didn't put a very strict code over us. He gave us kind of a general command, right? For Paul abolished the Sabbath, says Luther, to show us that the Sabbath was given to the Jews alone, for whom it is the stern commandment. Again, a falsehood, right? This is not true. I showed you, again, Isaiah 56, both and all three passages that talk about the Sabbath say it applies to sojourners or foreigners in the midst. Okay, so this is that. And then Calvin, he agreed too. Calvin wrote on Colossians 2, verse 16, we see now that Sabbath is done away with and the people are free from it. Oh, what freedom. And by the way, see, when you want to make people think something's bad, you say when you don't have to do it, you're free. You're free from it. It's like it was a slavery before. And actually, that's what Paul the images he uses, you don't want to be in bondage again. And this is in Galatians 3. He'll say, you who want to observe days and whatever, the law was given to Moses through angels, not God. Why do you want to obey those who are not God? You don't need to rest on Sabbath anymore. There is no more. That is dead and gone. I mean, so he in Galatians is adamant. In fact, we'll see that he actually curses them for trying to observe Sabbath. Tertullian, and although I believe this was an insert that was done by the Roman Church into his writing because it's inconsistent with his book, but you know what? It's in there, so let's put it in. It's in a book supposedly from 207 AD. Okay? We do not now treat the law rather than to remark that the apostle here teaches clearly how it has been abolished, even from passing from shadow to substance, that is, from figurative types to reality, which is Christ. Okay. So the Roman Catholic Church was willing to go back and corrupt the work from 207 AD. I have all things showing this is a corruption, but they only corrupted the issue on Sabbath and circumcision. They didn't go back and try to claim because Tertullian had a lot of proofs that Paul was wrong because he abrogated the law. But here, supposedly, he agreed on the one thing was the Sabbath was gone. Tertullian was agreeing the Sabbath was gone, which shows you. I bring this up because it shows you. The Roman Catholic Church was so adamant that Sabbath is really what they want to get rid of. The rest of the law, that's kind of a yay or nay type thing, like we can take it or leave it. But Sabbath we have to get rid of because that's our benefactor is Constantine. If we don't please him, he's going to screw us. So this was the wrong mentality. And I'm going to show you, though, that the Pope was himself not in support of the Trinity, the deity of Christ, or any of that. And Constantine knew it, and he's going to outmaneuver the Pope. I'll give you a quick lesson. 325 AD, Nicene Council. Who's the most important person to be there? Of course, the Bishop of Rome. Is he there? No. Why not? Because Constantine deliberately picked going all the way to Turkey because the infirm Pope couldn't go there. And he never, ever approves the Council of Nicaea decisions. He did not sign the articles. He had to send 2 legates. Constantine threatened everyone in the room. This is a fact of life. If you don't sign this, you're going to be exiled from the kingdom. 2 people didn't sign it. Guess what happened to those 2 people? They got exiled from the kingdom, all the way out to England, which was considered barbaric. So this guy is not a nice guy, and you can see why they were frightened of him. being sent to a barbarian land was virtually a death sentence. So 2 guys die. That's really what's going to happen. They're dead. They're dead. They know it the minute they walked out of there. They're being escorted by guards, by legionnaires, taking them all the way out to the farthest regions where the barbarians are. Where they kill and maim and do all this kind of stuff. And rob you blind. So that's what happened when you didn't sign on to the bi-deity of Christ. So the legates for the Pope signed, but the Pope refused to sign. And the Roman Catholic Church actually admits this, but they do it very subtly. They say the Pope never signed the articles, but his legates did. No, that doesn't make it valid. And under coercion and extortion, and everyone in that meeting knew it was a fraud. Okay, but we'll get back to that later another time. Anyway, I'm going to finish this point so this is solidly in your mind. Why did Paul get elevated? And we're going to see it goes from 0 to 100 in a minute. Okay, Paul in Romans, so numerous scholars agree Paul abolished Sabbath in Colossians, Mr. Jewett, Mr. Mosna, Danilou, and Mr. Nickel. Paul in Romans abolishes Sabbath again. He says it in Romans 14, verses 5 and 6. One man considers one day more sacred than another. Another man considers every day alike. Each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. Boom. So it's kind of whatever you want to do, whatever you feel like. You want to do it Sunday? Do it Sunday. You want to do it Saturday? Do it Saturday. But you know what? That's going to be too much law. Try to find Sunday or Monday or Tuesday, some other day. Just don't pick Sabbath. And I'm not kidding you, because that's what he basically does with the Galatians. Okay, so Danilou says this clearly. St. Paul proclaimed the end of the Sabbath. And just to show you, this is proof of Paul's apostasy. There is no exception from the rule of apostasy. In fact, the whole idea is that if you seduce anybody, Christian or Jew, who was subject to this rule, and we told you the Gentiles are subject to them when they're in affiliation with the sons of Israel, and they're being tagarons, so to speak, God-fearers, in the same congregation, they must follow Sabbath, and of course the Jews have to follow Sabbath, and it's not abolished. Paul is actually saying it's abolished. A man can follow whatever he wants, and there's no more Jew or Gentile. But that's not the way it is in God's economy. There's Jew and Gentile, and they have a different scope of obligations, but Sabbath is uniform between the two. But Paul is proclaiming an end to Sabbath, and that makes him an apostate under Deuteronomy 13, 1-10. I suggest if you don't know what I'm talking about, you go read it, and it's clear as day. It says if someone has true signs and wonders and true prophecy, God says, do not listen to him if he also comes to you and says, do not follow God's law in any respect, even a small respect, ladies and gentlemen. God said that person's an apostate. You must not listen to him. That's what it says. It also then says it's a death penalty, so you've got to understand it was a very severe thing to be an apostate from the law. And you got to know Jesus quotes this passage of Deuteronomy 13, 1-10 in Matthew 7, verses 21-23, so I recommend you go take a look at that if you don't understand it. But he says, those who have signs and wonders and cast out demons in my name, but if they work anomia, which is the word for apostasy in Deuteronomy 13, 1-10 in its Greek translation in 257 BC. So Jesus, not that he knew Greek or was intending to do this, but the word that ends up on the page is a word that can be and was intended in this context to mean apostasy. So Jesus was teaching the same thing about apostasy as Moses had taught, and Paul puts it right here on the page. Nobody wants to even hide the fact that he's an apostate. They tell you flat out what he's doing. They just don't tell you the rule of apostasy. They act like Paul is allowed to abrogate actually the law so far that he's abrogating the law so far that even the law that would make him an apostate, that law is gone too. He doesn't have this power. Who gave him this power? Okay, anyway. But Galatians is really the worst of them all. So Galatians 3, you just got to read it. You can't believe it. He curses people who want to obey Sabbath. So why would you be cursed for wanting to do something that's biblical? It's complete opposite of what you could imagine. But anyway, that's what he says. And Bart Ehrman agrees. So I'm not like alone in the wilderness here with this. So he actually says this. Paul bemoans Galatians who wish to keep Sabbath and observe the new moon as provided in the law. Paul then says, anathema, or cursed, are those who wish to be just or justified by keeping such parts of the law. And he refers to Sabbath, monthly festivals, etc. For otherwise, Paul argues they will have to keep all of the law. Oops, that's a horrible thing, isn't it, Paul? I've counted about 25 commands that the Gentiles have to worry about, Paul. What are you making them afraid of, Paul? Why can't they just do this? Why can't they rest on Saturday? So you must keep all law, not selected parts. What if it doesn't apply to them? What if it says sons of Israel need to get circumcised, Paul? They don't have to get circumcised then, right, Paul? Because they're not sons of Israel. And he says this in Galatians 1, verses 6 to 12, and Galatians 2, verses 14 to 16. Cursed if they do not continue in all parts of the law. And by the way, he misconstrues the law. It doesn't say cursed if you don't follow all parts of the law. It says cursed is the one who doesn't affirm the law is to be done. So it's actually cursing what Paul is actually teaching here. He is teaching the law doesn't need to be done in this particular regard. That's the curse. So he actually doesn't even read the curse correctly because it would point right at his own behavior. It's shocking. It's really just sometimes shocking how he can read text and just doesn't get it, or he's reading poor translations. But he's supposed to be a student of Gamaliel, so he's got to have the Hebrew text somewhere in his bailiwick and look at it and make sure he's not getting it wrong. I guess it's Galatians 3, 9 to 12. He says, they're under a curse. This is where he misquotes Deuteronomy, as explained at this link. Okay, maybe I'll take it back. He uses the curse in Galatians 2, 14, 16, but he doesn't quote the passage for it until he gets to 3, verses 9 to 12, and he misquotes it because it's not the way Deuteronomy actually reads. It reads that, if you don't confirm that the law should be followed, you are cursed. I mean, that's basically taking a position of apostasy. The law is no more. Don't follow it. That's it. But it's not if you don't follow one law that you're cursed. You violate one law, you're not cursed. But that's what he was trying to tell the Galatians. Paul's words are a clear echo of Colossians 2, verses 14 to 16, that effectively abolished obeying any holy day, new moon, or Sabbath day. In Galatians, Paul adds to this an attempt to frighten the reader that to keep the law meant the males also had to be circumcised, a painful operation for Gentile adults of that era. Unfortunately, Paul did not help assuage such fear by recognizing James' rationale in Acts 15 for not extending to Gentiles the law and circumcision. It was because Leviticus 12, verses 1 to 3 on circumcision clearly says it applies only to sons of Israel and did not extend to Gentiles unless they wish to partake of the Passover dinner. Also, if they wanted to go into the temple, that's become very moot since the temple's been destroyed. Here's Bart Ehrman, a professor of New Testament. He explains, Paul is absolutely clear in Galatians that he thinks non-Jews are not to do these things, that is, keep Sabbath or holidays, once they believe in Christ. In fact, he lays a curse on anyone who thinks that Gentiles who become to believe in Jesus should engage in such practices. And all I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, he is saying you're cursed for doing exactly what God said here that the Gentile must do for salvation. Right? It's right there. Right there in Isaiah. Isaiah 56, verse 2. If you don't remember that, try to remember. It's also in Isaiah 56, 4 to 6. Try to tell somebody, you Paulinists, try to tell somebody that you believe that they're cursed for doing the very thing that God says they have to do to be saved. But you're saying they're cursed. Actually, God's saying they're completely blessed, and you're cursed for not doing it. Do you not get the irony of what you guys teach is the opposite of God's word? You are all apostates going to hell. I'm trying to rescue you by showing you the lifeline out of your pit of hell, you dispensationalists, you anti-Christ. You've taken a position against the words of Christ, against the words God gave Moses, the words that Jesus gave. You just don't get it. I don't know how I'm going to get through to you guys. I'm trying, but it's just, I just get so much pushback from you guys. It's just unbelievable. And just you know what? I'm going to show you something here. How long is the law supposed to be in existence? God says it's eternal for all generations. So once there's no more giving and taking in marriage, it's gone. And Jesus said, when does the law go away? When you're in heaven, are there any more marriages going on? No. So once we get to heaven, the law is gone. That's different because God said it would be eternal only for the time period that there are generations of humans. But after that, no. So there is going to be a time, but it's eternal for all generations, not for all time. And he says this 12 times. You can't miss it. And these are all the passages. Okay, so I think we're done with this. And by the way, just so you know, there's one group that follows Paul to the T, and it's called the Jehovah Witnesses. Did you know, Paulinus, that you're all in common with them? The Jehovah Witnesses do not observe any day as the Sabbath day. They meet on different days of the week, usually Sunday, but not always, as they believe that the Old Testament was done away with, which includes the Torah and the Ten Commandments. So, are they going to do well Are they doing well under the Isaiah 56 test? You know, people say sometimes, like, if anybody has something in common with a heretic, you should point this out. Tell people you're doing something wrong. Well, if you're no different than a Jehovah Witness. Let me put it that way. At least they're trying to use the name of God, but they shouldn't, because they're totally not honoring His Sabbath. Okay, so anyway, going to stop on this point. I'm going to see if I have anything more. Okay, I promised one more thing, is to show you that by the time the Constantine comes around, and before he picks him out of the box and says, okay, I got my hero. Paul's my hero because he's going to get rid of all this problem, all these people trying to rest on Shabbat, all these Jews. I can tell them, you know what, this guy says he says he's a prophet of your religion. He's saying that you're falsely following the Sabbath. I'm going to order you all to worship on only Sunday, the son of the worship day for my God. My God is Sol Invictus. This is what he's telling. This is what he's saying to himself. Let me just tell you that he may not be telling the Christians what he's really doing, but that's what he's doing. So this is the proof that Paul had been eclipsed way, way before this time, and he was on the bottom of the barrel. Paul was eclipsed by Apostle John at Ephesus, and the scholars agree on this, because now Paul dies right around 64 AD, and according to, I showed you, Clement says he died a natural death and he just went out of the world. He was not martyred. That's a myth that came up. Why? Because Constantine needed more myths to make Paul higher, so that eventually became a myth after 325 AD, but not before. Before that, Clement said he died a natural death, and that was the last word on it for hundreds of years. No text in between says he died a martyr. So just simply a myth that was created because of the Constantine desire to elevate Paul. Anyway, so Paul's eclipsed. Apostle John outlived Paul. He moved into Ephesus, where Paul once preached for 3 months, converting many. However, Luke tells us in Acts 19, the Ephesus synagogue, which once accepted him, now expelled him. Paul was already on the decline there, as Paul himself admitted. Then 30 years later, Apostle John left Patmos and came to live in Ephesus, and brought those communities to follow the doctrines of Jesus. Paul was entirely eclipsed at Ephesus by Apostle John. Evangelical scholar F.F. Bruce, everyone will agree he is mainstream as you can come. Plain vanilla F.F. Bruce, but a very smart man. Explains how this disappearance of Pauline influence came about within Orthodox circles at Ephesus, as David Blair summarizes Bruce's points. So he is reviewing F.F. Bruce, Peter, Stephen, James, and John studies in early non-Pauline Christianity. See, he's seeing. So this has become a non-Pauline Christianity. Once Paul's gone, this is non-Pauline Christianity, particularly where John is operating. And if you read the book of Revelation, you're going to see an emphasis on Jewish law, Jewish everything. Right, so you look at it and you read it and you start reading it from a perspective and knowing that it's not only attacking Paul in Revelation chapter 2 and 3, but we read it from start to finish. You just see it over and over again. He's talking about the 144,000, the 12 gates of the 12 tribes to enter the New Jerusalem. It's all everywhere. So just let's read. The consideration of the Johannine community is perhaps the most conservative of these studies, yet much evidence is weighed back and forth. Bruce locates the community at Ephesus. References to heretical thought in the Gospel of John are reflective of a Roman Asian location. Also, the early church traditions of John at Ephesus are strong and extend through Papias, Polycarp, and beyond. So in other words, he's leaving his mark on the people who would later be the leaders in this area, the writers. While aware of the adventurous work of J. Louis Martin and Robert E. Brown in the community of the beloved disciple, Bruce leaves the question of the number of significant persons within the community open and sees a strong possibility of Apostle John in Ephesus and at Patmos. Okay, so I guess he's just simply saying that's the best evidence of why Paul is eclipsed, and he's not. These writers and commentators don't pay much attention to him. So Renan is another writer who loves Paul and attacks those who are anti-Paulinists, who don't like Paul. Okay, so this is in his book, St. Paul, 1875. He says this. Well, first of all, let's see what I have here. As Renan has stated, Paul gained a credibility among orthodoxy in the 300s at Rome, meaning Constantine, that did not all exist prior to that period. Renan begins by telling us Paul had no following among the Orthodox Christians groups until after his death, until the 300s. We're talking about in this time period, 325, 324, maybe as early as 324, but more after that time. After his disappearance from the scene of apostolic struggles, we find him soon forgotten. His death was probably regarded by his enemies as the death of an agitator. The 2nd century scarcely speaks of him. Justin, I'm going to interject here. Do you know he doesn't quote Paul once? And I think they say he doesn't even mention him once. Just Jesus. Just Jesus. Just Jesus. Just Jesus. What explains that? Paul was a nothing by the 200s. Okay, anyway, the 2nd century scarcely speaks of him and apparently endeavors to systematically blot out his memory. So Renan is saying, why would Justin not mention him at all? It's deliberate. He thinks it's deliberate to blot him out. But I think it's just like, you can see he's saying, I'm reading the memoir. His reliance was on a book called The Memoirs of the Apostles, which I think was the Hebrew Matthew. His epistles are then slightly read and only regarded as authority by a rather slim group. Wow. Did you know that, ladies and gentlemen? You were led to believe that he's this big guy because the book of Acts has been misdescribed to us as a book that's basically to try and make him look like a hero, rather than what we should have been told. It's a legal brief for an upcoming trial, and we have to focus on Paul because we got to, as a church, get him acquitted, because if Nero, who's going to hear this case, has any suspicion that Paul and any of the leadership are involved in being anti-Jewish, being disruptive of another legal sect, we could be outlawed. So everything hinges on us winning this trial. So you're going to bet we're going to do everything we can. We're going to translate the Hebrew Matthew into Luke's gospel. We're going to do a very thorough review of Paul and try to make him look like he's orthodox and fits in with our leadership, and he's not rebelling. He's told to go do something at the temple to show he's law compliant. He does so. He believes in works worthy of repentance. He believes in the law and prophets. He says all the right things in the book of Acts, and this is a perfect. And he gets endorsed by the Python priestess, which should really impress Nero, because he believes in the Python priestess's words. She's like the prophet of Europe, so she loves Paul. I mean, so there's so much good stuff there that this book was really designed. Acts is designed to win a trial, and it did. It got an acquittal for Paul. So we just get the wrong impression reading that somehow the early church was trying to elevate Paul. No, we're trying to win a trial. Anyway, he's slightly read and only regarded as authority by a rather slim group. His partisans themselves greatly weaken his pretensions. I don't know what he means by that. Maybe his partisans. I think he means Marcion. So even though Marcion was a supporter of his, is that basically, if you're a Christian and you see what Marcion's doing, he's mixing Paul in with. Really, there's 3 gods. There's God the Father, who's now supposed to be the demiurge. He's a bad guy. He has to go to Sheol when he's dead. And Jesus had a Father God that's nicer, very nice, and he's the God that is Jesus' God, and not Yahweh. Yahweh's in hell, Sheol. And he's going to reign over the Jewish people in Sheol forever. So he's going to get his fate. He gets what he deserves, so to speak. And Jesus and his God reign. And so you see, you have this, and this is a Gnostic type myth, if you ask me. But a lot of scholars don't like to admit this is Gnosticism, but it's clearly Gnosticism. And you're saved by what? Gnosis. You just have to know some facts about Jesus. He died, rose from the dead, and you're saved. Gnosis, right there. Just knowledge of facts. That's all it is. And that term was used mockingly of people who believed just like Marcion, just like all the Paulinists of today. All the dispensationalists would be mocked as Gnostics if you were alive back then, ladies and gentlemen, because you believe exactly what a Gnostic does. And the mockery was not because they believe in multiple gods or God lives in Sheol. They were mocking that you believe in gnosis, that you're saved by just knowing facts. That's the whole point of the mockery. So, Gnosticism is still with us, if you ask me. That all the dispensationalists are Gnostics. They're heretics. They would be heretics in the 2nd century, at the time of this period where the church has completely gone away from Paul. And they're calling people who talk like Paul, that talk about faith alone. These are the Gnostics. They believe knowledge is going to save you because their faith is just faith in facts. He has no celebrated disciples. Do you realize that? None of the people that he has mentioned in his epistles are famous. Did anything. Timothy, whatever, they're gone. They disappear. They're invisible. Well, so nothing. No biographies or anything. Titus, Timothy, and so many others who, as it were, constituted his court disappear without renown. He's completely right. Just disappeared. All right. Let me just see. Renan also says this. In the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries, so Renan records what happened in the 300s to Paul's legacy as a consequence. In the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries, Paul will increase wonderfully. Okay, so he's really picked up on the point. Something's happened in the 300s. What do you think it is? I'm pointing to you to the obvious fact. Paul hates Sabbath, teaches you're cursed if you follow it. This is exactly in line with what Constantine wants. He wants people to rest and worship on the day he created 4 years, 321 AD, 4 years before he made any whimper that he had any feelings positive towards Christianity. He'd already made a day special for his god, Sol Invictus, the sun, the god of the sun. He will become the teacher par excellence, the founder of Christian theology, the true president of those great Greek councils which make Jesus the keystone of a system of metaphysics, is the Apostle Paul. But in the Middle Ages, especially in the Occident, his fortune will undergo strange eclipse. So now he's saying that much later in time he'll be eclipsed. Paul will say scarcely nothing to the heart of the barbarians. Outside of Rome, he will possess no legend. So, yeah, outside of Rome, Rome is the one who wants him. They have the paganism that will feed off of Paul's, if you ask me, false teachings. But they love it because that's what they want people to be pagans, dressed in Christian clothes. This is perfectly, Jesus used the word for it, wolves in sheep's clothing. They appeared to be Christian, but they're not. Okay, so I hope this has given you, you dispensationalists out there, I hope there's a wake-up call for you that you can now see what the darkness that you've been living in. You can't see this until somebody points it out to you. But by showing you these quotes, you can't deny the facts are right in front of your face that Paul was and nothing until Constantine grabbed him from the depths of basically the pit of hell. He's down there and he's lost. Nobody wants him. And nobody's quoting him. Justin doesn't even mention him, and his books have survived. I mean, and nothing? Shocking. So anyway, I pray to God that this will help those people who are on the fence to finally start opening your mind. But we're not done. We're going to keep going on Constantine because I think there's a lot more lessons than just this. And we have to know as Protestants that Roman Catholicism is triple, quadruple the size of anything Protestantism has done currently, and over time has been far many more millions of people who follow Roman Catholicism. So we have to try to get educated to help them understand what went wrong for them. They basically, went so far as to make anybody who claimed that you need to follow Sabbath were Judaizers, and it was a crime. And they actually passed laws under Justinian that said if a Jewish person in the church, in their synagogue, said the Shema, God is one, would go to jail. And literally, there were guards set up by the Roman government over every synagogue to listen to see would people say God is one. And if they did, they went to jail. Do you realize how far Christianity went to literally outlaw the Shema that Jesus said was what? The most important commandment of the Bible. He said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God." And he then says, "Love," and the command is to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Jesus said that was the most important commandment combined. So, wow, we have so gotten far away from what Jesus taught. But hopefully we're pulling you back towards Jesus, and you're finally going to start realizing that's the only person you should be listening to. And he's going to point you back at Moses too. Then you listen to Moses because you're following the master's directions by doing that. And you will then be what's your end goal? The end goal is not to be liked by your friends, your social circles, the church buddies you go to church with. No, you want to go to heaven, and you're heading to hell. Those of you who follow this dispensational nonsense, just get rid of it. Get rid of it and follow Jesus. That's what you got to just say. There's something wrong. You didn't know it, why it was. It's an historical anomaly that we're in this weird situation where the truth is this very small group of people who are trying to break through and show people what's going on. But it's all factual. It's the truth. Truth can never be destroyed because truth is stronger than numbers. It has nothing to do with the number of people who believe in it. It's whether it's true or it's not, and it's true. All right, God bless. Take care, everybody. Good night. Ciao. Bye.